you've got quite a list, and I want to go into the industrial and commercial installation, or wow, installations. What does that encompass? Just in general terms.
Well, there's two different facets to the installations. There's Greenfield and Brownfield. Brownfield being adding on to an existing facility, whereas Greenfield's brand new, right from the ground up. Either one is good for us. We don't segregate or look for one or the other. It's important to when you do Greenfield that you have to realize it's going to be longer term. Whereas your brownfield, basically, you have operations already happening, so you got to be aware of that.
Right. When you're coming into these projects, either or, how much input do you have on the basically the specs that go into it, or is it all in both cases, Greenfield and Brownfield? Is it preset, or is your team coming in knowing exactly what needs to be done? Or is there an advisory process as well, or does it depend on the company that you're working with and the project?
That's a good question. Yes, definitely both facets happen depending on the relationship. A lot of construction is repetitive. In other words, you have a customer that you've done work for, whether it's a general contractor, so on and so forth. You can get into situations where they rely on your experience to kind of help guide through the design process. And we find that happens quite often. In other cases, though, if it's a newer customer, we'll have a set of drawings to work from, create the budget for them, and work within those parameters.
The other thing I wanted to touch on, and I've had a lot of guests on the show, and instrumentation now is sort of woven into industry. I suppose it always was, but now, measuring everything, especially let's say in the mining industry or oil and gas, is just so important. Pulp and paper and things like that. How much of a role does instrumentation now play within Lakewood, and also how much has it grown from, let's say, 10 years ago?
Like every technology, it's skyrocketing. So 25 years ago, we were still working on pneumatic control, which is not electronic. And then the electronic world came along, much like all the electronics we deal with every day, are a lot more user-friendly, and also gives you a lot more information on what your process is doing. So that conversion's been happening in the last 20, 25 years. Now we see very little pneumatic and mostly electronic control, and integrated into their control schemes.
So do you get into much upgrade with the instrumentation that these like the pulp and paper side of it? Some of these older plants and that, you must be coming in and actually upgrading their equipment in some cases, right?
Yes, absolutely. Take the Canfor pulp mills in Prince George, for example. We've been converting those for at least 30 years and have finally got most of the pneumatic stuff converted over. And now it's maintaining and adding, and every new project has that element of new instrumentation added to it, which over the years has been refined to different types of systems. There's different ways to integrate that into their control scheme. So we've done all facets of that, actually.
Yeah, I realize you could literally do a whole series on instrumentation, probably about 50 episodes, but if you were to break it down, like Canfor or a mining project, a processing plant, things like that, what does the instrumentation involve? What are the main features of it?
I would say mostly Mostly the calibrating to start off with. Calibration is a very important part in setup prior to installation. Planning the installation and integrating it with the electrical is probably
Right.
one of the biggest things that you have to look at. Because if you're trying to do two different installations, what ends up happening, the install becomes very cumbersome. But if you work together with electrical and instrumentation, you can combine those installs and make it very neat and tidy around the equipment, which allows maintenance to remove equipment like motors and that sort of thing. That's a
Right.
huge advantage by that process.
So I'm just actually curious about it. When you started, when instrumentation really came on, I mean, obviously Lakewood was already established. Did it require a lot? Did you have to hire new people that understood it? Did you have to go to training programs and get certification? I mean, what is the switch? And I'm sure that it continues to evolve. We have people coming on our show that are talking about all the new technology that's the electrical components and monitoring systems and everything that's always upgrading. So what does it sort of take to first, when you first had to transition into it, but also to stay up to date as as a company on all this?
When instrumentation started to go electronic, the industry divided. So electrical used to do strictly electrical. Instrumentation was tubing. And what ended up happening is the trade divided into electrical and into instrumentation. So instrumentation has grown as far as the training. There's a separate trade, and it's basically a 4 to 5 year process. In the last 4 or 5 years, Technical Safety BC has now required or identified instrumentation as regulated work, which means that you have to have a QA/QC program. You have to have you have to prove that you're qualified to do the work, and that you provide that information to technical safety so that they know that everything's done properly, because you can get into some pretty high pressures, high temperatures,
Right.
and that sort of thing. So that's why it's regulated now. And it's just something has started. Lakewood has done that. We've gone through that process. We've developed our program and are fully certified within the province to do that work.